yeah, I really enjoy what you were saying about the price difference and basically how the no code can save the businesses a lot of money. And so basically, and the time difference in basically starting and creating like a no code versus a traditional method. So that really made a lot of sense to me. So I know you said that you've saved clients like millions of dollars so far, in your career with the no coding. Um, in app development, uh, like what's the secret to creating such impactful and cost-effective solutions with the process of the no coding? Like, is it like a secret to it, or it's just the way I guess I'm trying to get a deeper understanding of it.
So, I mean, ultimately, it just comes down to we're not kind of in the weeds writing code, right? And so we're taking kind of pre-built elements and leveraging that to do it. And that's where the time savings is. What
Mm-hmm.
we have learned over the years of building these apps that has been a key step that we used to not always do, but we've learned that we need to do it, right? Is really has nothing to do with no code because it's a step that really should be done whether you're doing code or no code. And that's the wireframing process. So if you're not familiar with wireframings, it's basically kind of basically what's called a user experience or user interface designer will basically design the details of every single major screen in an app, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they'll create all the buttons, all the every single, if you click this button, it goes here. So it'll go through every single major element and screen in an app. And what we've learned is when we don't do that, right? And especially the clients that we get with no code, no code, which are smaller, not these big enterprise entities, but what we find, and also people that don't have a technical background, because what we find is people come in with an idea of what they want to build, but what we found is if we started building without doing the wireframes, once they started seeing it, they would kind of learn like, oh, that's not what I want. I really wanted to do this. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so we would be wasting a lot of time building and then rebuilding and then making changes. Right. And so when you go through the wireframing process, it forces you to think through when this user does this, this is what I want it to do, or these are the features I want, these are the buttons I want,
Yeah.
these are the fields I want them to fill out, right? And it forces them to make decisions and think through more than if we don't do that process. So it's not exactly answering a question, but it's kind of the best way I can answer that question. And again, doesn't really have anything to do with no code per se, but we've just learned that that's a really key part in the process. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it make a lot of sense. It be like it's pretty simple. It just is the way I guess the time it takes to develop it. It saves money on your end for what you have to pay your workers, but it also saves the client because it don't take as long to develop.
Exactly, exactly. And we don't waste a lot of time kind of with the
Mm-hmm.
client changing minds. But from a no code standpoint, it just comes down to you're using pre-built elements to piece things together, and that just saves a significant amount of time. Because if you look at most business applications, right, like a game is probably something a little bit different, but most business applications, you're creating data, you're reading data, you're changing data, you're displaying data, you're deleting data, right? And so those are kind of
Mm-hmm.
consider exactly how you're doing is going to change every app, but at the end of the day, that's ultimately what you're doing for most apps that you're working with, right? And so with no code, you're using kind of pre-existing workflows that you're kind of piecing together. And so, the fact that you don't have to write out every detail for every step really
Yeah.
cuts down on the development time, and
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
ultimately why we're able to save so much time and money.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense because you have I guess say like pre-built templates in a sense where you say with the wireframing, so you kind of have a basis already for structuring it. And so you're not starting from like ground zero where you're starting the code and you're going
Yeah,
step by step. Yeah. Makes a lot
exactly.
of sense. I know we talked a little bit about AI a minute ago. I know AI is a big factor in just everything, especially in tech space, but just in general everything right now, and where reshaping everything, what people do, everything, think, the way people approach things. Um, I know it's changed, transformed industries definitely. How do you see AI, automation, and no code development intersecting to shape the future of startups?
That's a I'm gonna say million, but really $1 billion, if not $1 trillion question, right?
Mm,
I think so. Number one is I'm gonna use a technical term. And I'm gonna try and make it as non-technical as possible. So right now, most AI models are accessible through what's called an API interface, which is an application programmatic interface, I think is what it stands for. And so
mm,
basically, it's a way to communicate. Two different systems can communicate. So what's nice is no code platforms make it really easy to integrate with a really easy to integrate with any API, and in
mm,
particular, an AI API, right? And then there's another layer where one of the tools that we use is Xano, which is basically just the back end or primarily the database portion. One of the things that's come up a lot, and so I'm excited about this update is Xano allows you to install your own instance of an AI model onto that server, and
mm,
it's just your instance. And so a lot of times there are concerns, and they're supposed to address this with the terms and conditions, but I think there's generally a mistrust because AI works because you're using a whole bunch of other data to train the AI on how to do specific tasks.
mm,
Well, the issue is if you're worried about other people getting access to your data, then there's a concern with using AI because if I train my AI on my data, does that then give access to other people, using that data as well? And
mm,
so that's been the concern. It's kind of a catch-22 because the more data the AI has, the more effective it has on it. So it is a little bit of a challenge, but in this case, we can actually install your own instance of an AI on your own server so it's not accessible to a third party, and then you can train it on that. So going back to your original question though, is it's actually super easy
mm,
to connect a no code application to an AI model. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is back to my original thought is doing it is easy. How to use it in a way that's solving a problem is the hard part, right? And that's where the biggest opportunities are. The biggest opportunities are people understanding a problem better than other people and then building a solution that addresses that problem by leveraging the power of AI and then also leveraging the power of no code. So I don't think the technical side is that hard. It's not.
mm.
It's actually not. If you know what you're doing, it's actually not that hard to build an AI app. Everyone and their
Okay.
mother is doing it. I think the hard part is figuring out how to deploy that AI in a way that's solving problems in a way that no one else is doing. Does that make sense? To me, that's the
Yeah.
harder problem. Building it is actually not that hard. And so,
Yeah.
for
That
me,
makes
I would
sense.
just be looking at, okay, again, what I said at the beginning, like what are problems that I see, and then going back and then figuring out, okay, how can AI do XYZ. Can again, you may need some expertise on that. If you don't understand AI well enough, you may need to bring in expertise like myself or other people that do it to
Mm,
help you understand what the AI is capable of. But the building of it is not that hard. Does that address that question?
yeah, it does. I understand. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Are you saying basically saying if you have the technical background of it, I guess like the creation of it's not part, but it's I guess the other side of the application side of it. And
How do you use it, right? How do you
yeah,
use it in a way that's meaningful
mm,
and actually make someone's life better?
yeah,
Because we could go spin up a AI app in a couple weeks, if we needed to. But how are you actually using the AI to solve a problem? That's the part that I think is the question mark. And if you get that part right, the rest of it's actually not that hard. And I think that's that's what's, you just see so many AI apps,
Mm-hmm.
popping up left and right now, right? And so it just the barrier's been lowered. So the technical part used to be the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
The technical part, I don't think is as much the challenge anymore. I think the challenge is finding a unique way to solve a problem that no one else is solving. Is
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that I think is really, and again, I don't think you need to have a technical background to get that part right. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have the technical knowledge, then it's about partnering with someone that does. And but that barrier to entry is much, much, much lower than it was a couple years ago. You, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even a year ago is much lower.
Yeah. And it's probably going. Yeah, I
You got to
imagine that
keep getting
number is
lower.
gonna. Yeah, get lower. Yeah, over time.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know we talk like startups. I know we talk a lot about startups. They often struggle with creating a MVP that
Mhm.
are truly reasonable or that truly resonates with users. What advice do you have for founders to validate their ideas and build an impactful MVP using no code?
That's a loaded question, and I have some thoughts about that. So, number one is I kind of alluded to this earlier, but ultimately your number one job when you're launching a startup is you need to validate that someone will pay for the solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think number one, people just take way too. I've been mentoring founders, and they're just taking way too long to validate that, right? And again, I've done it
Yeah.
myself, so I get it. But the second part of that, and this is going to sound funny coming from someone that runs an app development company, is sometimes you don't need an app to validate that, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it might mean you offering it as a service, right? First, right, where you almost kind of do it manually, right? And what that does is a couple things, right? Number one is you do exactly what I said. You validate if someone is willing to pay for that solution, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it might be more expensive initially because it's a service, right? Or maybe
Yep.
or maybe if you want to validate, maybe you take a little bit of a loss to validate, but at least you validate that someone's willing to pay for it, right? Um, but a couple other things happen, right? You learn on a very intimate level by offering as a service, working, face to face with the customer, where
Mm-hmm.
their pain points are. You really understand their pain points. But then hopefully one of the other things you're trying to do is in delivering that service, you're trying to look for a repeatable process that you can create to deliver that service in a very effective manner, right? And then what I've kind of done and had some success with is maybe what you could do is in finding that repeatable process and delivering it as a service, you build a tool for yourself, right? To
Mm-hmm.
make that delivery of that service more efficient. And then so you're using it, you're your first user, and you're seeing, okay, well, okay, to do this repeatable process better, I need to do X, Y, Z. You make the changes there. And then what kind of happens is you've built almost your prototype for yourself that
Mm-hmm.
eventually you can say, you know what? I think now what I can do is turn this into a software application I can offer to the public. And now because that doesn't take any of my time, it can be delivered at a much lower cost, right? Which makes it much more attractive. Yeah. And so to me, now that doesn't work every time, right? There's going to be some solutions where that might not work. But if you can do it that way, then you almost can use that consulting income or service income to pay for the app development, right? And then again, you've done the number one job, which is you validated that someone says, this is a
Yeah.
really painful problem for me. I will absolutely pay someone for a solution, right? And so to me, if you can do it that way, I almost think that is a better approach. And again, that doesn't work for everyone, but I think that is kind of if you can do it that way. That for instance, I think they even said like I forget which one it was. I don't know if it was like a DoorDash or like an Instacart. I can't remember, but they
Mm,
almost kind of validated like that type of solution that way, where
yeah,
what they did was they started off by like getting people to say, "Hey, I need groceries delivered." Then they would just there was no app. They would just take the order, go and deliver it, and then they would kind of like in doing that process, they figured out kind of what they would need to do to deliver that service in a more efficient manner, and that eventually
yeah,
morphed into and again, I can't remember what solution it was, but it was like an Instacart type of solution, but that eventually morphed into that
yeah,
Instacart type of solution. So even something like that could be kind of started in that service-based solution and then moved into a more of a technology-based solution. Does that make
mm,
sense?
yeah. It does. Yeah, because you said validate it. Make sure somebody else gonna pay for it, and then instead of creating an app, just offer it as a service and see will
Yeah.
people use it, and then from there you navigate and figure out what's the right way of, I guess, creating the app through the process of actually doing it in the real world.
Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
almost, you could even build kind of a very simple front end. Um, you know, I'm going to use this example. I think it was. I'm. I don't want to. I want to be careful how I frame this. So Elizabeth Holmes, if you read the book, she was the one. She's gone to jail because she had that therapeutic device that eventually was determined to be fraud, right? And so what when I read the book about it, and ultimately what was happening was they were pretending like this machine worked, right? That
Mm,
they could drop in blood and then it would like run the test. Really, what was happening is they would run the sample to another room, they would run it there, and then send the results to the machine. I'm not
mm,
suggesting that you commit fraud, but in some level, that's almost kind of what you're doing, like in that early stages, is that
yeah.
you're giving someone an interface, and then you're kind of like behind the scenes, doing it, manually. And again, you don't want to do it in a way that's fraudulent, but I give
Yeah.
that example because that's a little bit almost like what you're doing, right? Like you're
Yeah.
showing this device, and then you're doing it manually, and then eventually you're building it so you're automating that process. And so I kind of want to be careful how that comes across, but that's kind of an interesting kind of example because a lot of people know that story. But I read that, and it's like that I always think of that example when I explain this to people. And again, you don't want to do it where you're fraudulently telling people what this device can do today. But a little
Yeah.
bit behind the curtains, it's almost like a Wizard of Oz, where you're doing it behind the curtains, and you're delivering the service. It's not as efficient as it can be, but you're learning how it needs to be done so that you can eventually build a technical solution to deliver that in the same way. Is that so? Again,
Mm, yeah.
I want to be careful how I say that, but I think, but again, that's always the example I think of when I explain that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm not familiar with that story though, but that's pretty interesting though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Elizabeth Holmes. I forget. It's like Farrah something. She ended up raising like billions of dollars,
Mm,
and it was just a machine that didn't work. And I remember reading the story. It was a New York Times author that kind of highlighted that story, and they basically explained it because of former employees like shared where they did a demo of the machine. They would,
mm,
ultimately it was like a machine that you could do blood tests like at your Walgreens, right? You could do it right on the
yeah.
spot. You could take the blood and put it right in the machine. It would take everything. But when they did the demo to investors, they literally were like taking the things and running it in another machine, in real
Yeah.
life, and then sending the results. But in that case, they were lying to investors that the machine was doing itself. So I'm not suggesting that, but that's a
Mm,
little bit along the lines of what you're trying to do in the beginning is
yeah.
just you're doing it in a way that's not as technical, but you're at least giving the end user the experience of where the vision is, right? And seeing, okay, what it is, this something that they value. So,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. I understand. You really just it's a way of testing it out to see if
exactly.
it's gonna be received, see if it got value, and see
Exactly.
where
No,
where
exactly. It's
what you
just
need
don't do it
to.
in fraudulent ways. Is my
Yeah.
main takeaway
Yeah.
from that story.
Yeah. Just make sure you do it legal,
Yeah,
a legal way.
exactly.
I got you. So I know you're known for making complex tech topics accessible. How do you approach bridging the gap between technical solutions and non-technical clients?
Oof. Um, that's a good question. So I think ultimately what I've learned is, and I think and this is true, coming from a teaching background. I think this is always true. When you know something really well, you take a process that is really 10, 15, 20 steps.
Mm,
And in your mind, because you've been doing it for so long, you almost combine that step into one, right? And so when you're explaining it, you're like, oh, and then it does this. But that this is really 10 or 15 little steps, right? And so if you're
yeah.
not familiar with it, you're not making the connection between, you know, that doesn't make sense. Well, how does this happen, right? And
Mm,
so I think a lot of it is taking something that's complex and understanding that that one thing in my mind is really these little tiny things, right? And
mm,
so breaking it down for someone that doesn't have that background, and I think there's a fine line between breaking it down too much because that can be overwhelming too, but breaking it
yeah.
down in small enough steps that it makes sense to someone, but also not getting too deep in the weeds to
Mm.
that they're like,
To
oh my
lose
God,
them. Yeah.
they just
Yeah.
get
Oh,
they just get
yeah.
overwhelmed, right?
Cause you don't want to overwhelm them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit about what needs to happen and what I try to do. And sometimes it's tough. I do my best but that's really what I definitely try and do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the more the knowledge a person may have about tech and how things operate, it makes it easier to, I guess, maybe explain to those, but some people may just be, I guess, kind of vanilla to it, so they may not know anything. So you have to kind of break it down, look in a simpler way.
Well, what I think helps, right, is I come from a non-technical background myself, right? I
Hmm.
think it would be harder if I came from a coding background and trying to explain how things work to a non-technical founder. I think that would be harder, but I think the fact that I know their vantage point because
Yeah.
I started there myself, right? And I think that always helps. But I've also been doing enough where I try and constantly educate myself. But to your point, the more that I understand it, the easier it is for me to then kind of break it down, right? If I didn't
Mm,
fully understand it, I think it's hard to, you know, they say uh, when I was teaching, there was a thing called the learning pyramid, right?
mm,
Is I think the research around the learning period was faulty, but the general idea I think makes sense. Is that like if you read something, you're only going to retain a certain amount, right?
mm,
If you go and do something, you're only going to retain a certain amount. But if you go and teach someone something, that's where you're really going to understand it on a deeper
mm.
level. And so I think
Yeah.
really that's where I try and take that extra step to understand things on a different level because the more I understand it, the better I am at explaining it and breaking it down for someone. So
Mm.
yeah, but
Yeah, that's
yeah, so
true.
I
I've always heard that you really don't know something until you're able to teach it to somebody.
Yeah, and then that's ultimately what
Mm,
that learning pyramid is saying. Like I said, the research behind it is a little bit questionable, but I think the general premise is absolutely true.
mm-hmm. I know earlier we mentioned I mentioned that you're being the mentor for the Founder Institute. Um, what are the most common mistakes you see new founders making, and how do you guide them toward, uh, you know, having some sustainable success and growth?
So one I've already mentioned. Um, they're all kind of related, but the number one thing is what I mentioned. And again, I recognize it because I made it myself. Is they're so keen on building an app and doing all these things when they haven't even validated that someone will pay for a solution, right?
Yeah,
And you can waste a lot of time and find out down the line that no one wants to pay for for what you built, right? And so
mm,
that's that's the common thing where you've built someone that you're looking for a market to sell to, right? Like you want to find the
yeah,
market, find the solution, and then and validate from there. But beyond that, I think founders startups fail at such a high rate. And
Yeah.
sometimes founders can't step outside of themselves and be honest and realize that, right? Like the success rate for startups is very low, right? And what happens is so many founders I speak to are are doing things in a way because they're so concerned about what happens if I have 100,000 users.
Mm-hmm.
I said that, you know what? That's a great problem to have, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have that problem, I promise you, you're gonna figure out a solution to it. But don't try and solve that problem today, right?
Yeah.
And
You're
so they're
not. You're
doing
not there
things
yet.
where
Yeah.
it's like they're trying to build this Cadillac when they don't need the Cadillac. They need the the electric bike, right? Like like they need just enough to prove what they're doing is worthwhile. But I just see too many people trying to go and build the Cadillac right away or the
Yeah.
Tesla today, right? Versus, and this is again where no code is valuable, is you can build something really simple to start, and honestly, it's going to be honestly, you're going to have a better result, because what happens if you build something too complicated? There's a lot of crap that can go wrong, right? Like there's a lot of you're doing a lot of debugging, and you're trying to figure out where stuff is broken. And if you built it too
Yeah.
complicated, you're trying to problem solve too many things, right? So the simpler you start, and then again with no code, it's so easy and quick to take that initial feedback and then make changes, that you really want to start simple, and
Mm-hmm.
then as users give you feedback, then you start to add kind of additional layers. But too many people are trying to start with where they think it should be. And the problem is that's based on their perspective. That's not based on your market's perspective, right? And you might
Mm-hmm.
be part of that market, but still one user's perspective. So
Yeah.
I would say that too many people are building as if they already have 100,000 users, when in reality
Yeah.
you have none right now, right? And so you want to build for where you are today, but also also build in a way that it's easy to make those changes as you grow, but you don't want to start with that that Tesla solution right out of the gate. And I see too many people um, starting there, right?
Yeah.
And then, like I said, like 99 times out of 100, your first solution is just not going to be what you think it is. Most people end up with a solution that's completely different than when they started. But
Mm-hmm.
they're building this really, they've got such a clear vision, and I don't fault them for it, because I did the same thing. But 99 times out of 100, that vision is not quite right. And so they're building that, and you spent all this time building it, and then you find out after the fact it's like no one wanted that.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's a painful experience, but I've seen it over and over again. I went through it myself, and I see that happen too often. So I would say that's really the number one mistake that I see and also made myself.
Yeah. So, like you said, basically, people are creating something off of what they think versus what they know. And so,
Exactly. And
but you,
learning what it should be through
hmm
a process versus, you know, assuming that you know what it should be and then just building that. Like to me,
yeah,
that's been that again, a mistake I made, and it's a mistake I see over and over again with the people that I talk to.
hmm no, it make a lot of sense. But I think your idea is more of a practical approach to it. You know.
It increases your chances of being successful,
Hmm.
right? Because again, everyone has this vision, they build the full kit and caboodle, and then they find out after they spend all that time and money that no one wants that, versus you spend a lot less time, a lot less money, and then you learn what people want through that process. It gives you a much
Yeah,
higher chance of success than starting with,
yeah,
just thinking what's best, and then just building that, and then like I said, wasting a lot of time and money. I've seen it over and over again, and I've gone through it myself.
yeah. Because the goal, ultimate goal, is for the business to make income, to make
Exactly.
money. Yeah.
Exactly. And you can't do that unless people want it,
Hmm.
right? And so, and that's why I say, like, you could do a survey, and people will say, oh, yeah, yeah, I'll pay for this. And then all of a sudden you ask them to pay for it, and then they left their wallet at home, Like I've seen that over and over again, right? But
Yeah.
on the flip side, like if you got a half-baked product but it's solving a problem that no one else wants,
Mm,
that's a really strong signal that you're doing something that really is solving that pain point, right? And so that's the other side of the coin is if and you've seen that over and over again, like you, these startups that have been really successful, they got this like janky looking product to start, right? Like you've heard product, the stories of like Uber when it started, like it was a janky
yeah.
product to start, but it was like it was solving a problem that people had, and so they were
Mm,
still paying for it, right? So to me, like they always say like you're looking for what's always called product market fit, right? And product market fit really is what I just said is you're solving a problem for a market that no one else is solving right now, right? And so
mm,
they always say that you'll know when you get product market fit, and you'll know because it's like, oh crap, like how do we handle this much volume, right? Like
yeah.
the
Yeah.
people just they'll tell their friends, it just grows
The word
organically.
spread fast. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's this pent up demand that people have been looking for a solution for this and they haven't gotten it, and then you delivered it, and it's like it's just like a switch goes on, the faucet gets turned on, and so that's what you're trying to get to, and so I think that approach that I'm talking about gives you a better chance at getting to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's gonna make sense to the user as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. I mean, not the user, but the listeners. I said the wrong thing. Yeah. So looking ahead at like innovation, the no-code AI spaces are evolving, rapidly. We've already talked. What trends or advancements are you most excited about, and how do you see them shaping the future of business?
I'll be honest. Um, the trend I'm most excited about is also the one I'm kind of most scared of too, I definitely the combination of AI and no code opens up so many possibilities,
Hmm.
right? And I just see I just see a lot of people being left behind in it as well. You know what I mean? Because they don't adapt
Hmm.
quick enough, right? And I don't know if there's not many areas that are safe because I look at they're training AI on how to read, medical tests, right? MRIs and X-rays, right? And so,
Hmm.
that they're training. You're seeing Elon Musk launching robots, right? And so
Hmm.
it's going to be a time of a lot of um, innovation. And in some sense, from a technical standpoint, that's exciting.
Yep.
But, also as a human, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty too. And so maybe one of the things you want to solve, maybe one of the problems that there are to solve is, okay, well, if we go in this direction of AI and whether it's robots or whatever it is, kind of taking over these types of
Hmm.
roles, what is it that humans can do? Like I think that's going to be a problem, right? And I think that's a
Yep.
problem that they have to do something, right? And so I think that is the trend that I see.
Mm.
Is I I just there's so much the innovation's happening so quickly
Yeah.
that I don't see a peak to it, right? Like and you think about the way AI works, the more it learns, the quicker it
Smarter
moves,
gets.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
you play that out, and this only gets faster and faster, right? And so I think it's really I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on this, but but I think it's that's the line I see.
Yeah.
And I think most of us, and probably even myself, I was talking to someone, an AI expert yesterday. Um, he's dealing with AI on a much deeper because it's mostly on an enterprise level that he's working on, right? And so I'm
Hmm.
usually dealing with smaller clients, and so my AI use cases are probably less. on a lower level than he is, but he's just the things that he's working on specific to AI. I mean, he was telling me a scenario where he built a solution where there's multiple layers of AI that are literally talking to each other to solve a
Mm,
specific problem, right? So he's got AIs doing specific tasks,
yeah,
and each one has a specific task. And then in completing the bigger picture, they are communicating with each other. And so it's like, conceptually I get it, but it's like that's stuff that he's working on. So it's you know, I think the average person doesn't even know what's capable right now. And
yeah,
so I mean I think that's really where I'm seeing, and then it's really just it's adapting as best you can on each individual basis, right? You want to be ahead of the curve for as long as possible, as long as you
yeah,
can be, right? The more you understand it, the more you can leverage it, the more valuable you can be, right? As in this new world going forward. So I don't, like I said, I'm sure we'll figure something out. But I mean, again, if you play out the current trend, there's very few jobs that I can see that can't be replaced by some combination of AI and a robot, right? And
yeah.
so how do you like we talked about early on, like how do you go where the puck is going when it's going that
No, really.
fast? So I think that's going to be a challenge. I mean, I think we'll figure it out like we always do, but it's definitely, like I said, from a pure technical standpoint, it's interesting. As a
Mm.
human being, it's like, okay, well,
Like,
what's the impact?
what's the
What's
solution
the
of
cost
the
of that?
use?
Yeah,
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 because I know it was a while, maybe a year ago. So I forgot what podcast, but it was a guy. I guess he was an expert on technology and AI and stuff. He was saying that in his prediction, it was like by year 2040 something, most jobs are gonna be gone because of AI. The way things are, but maybe sooner than that. So I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know the number, but I just see it getting faster. It just seems like it's getting closer and closer. Just because
yeah,
every day you see AI, getting rolled out for something new. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is the way you've always done things isn't gonna work, and I think you have to be of a mindset, and I think this is where a lot of people aren't built that way, where you're gonna have to unlearn what you've always learned, always known, and realize that there's going to be a different way. And the more you hold on to that, because you and I both know AI is going to be
yeah,
here whether we embrace it or not, right? So you'd
hmm,
rather be the one that understands it, knows how to leverage it, than the one that's kind of left behind and doesn't understand it.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's no really no direct answer to it because
No,
it can go in so many ways. It's gonna
exactly.
affect,
Yeah.
not on every level from the very top all the way down. It's gonna have a big effect. Because I know even with Elon with Tesla, I know he cut his workforce by like 50, I think 50% at the factories for the Tesla factories.
He did that
With
at
the
Twitter too. Yeah, he did that at Twitter. He
Yeah,
did the same thing
with
at Twitter.
the bots he got.
Yeah.
So and that number from what I watch is going to be more over the next couple of years as he developed those even more. So and he's the creator of it. So just imagine when and they supposed to produce them at a price where it's going to be, I ain't gonna say cheap, but it's going to be, I think,
Accessible. Yeah, more accessible than it is
accessible
today.
to
Yeah.
for most people,
Yeah.
10 to 20,000 range. So and imagine that multiplying by, it's 300 million some people in the United States alone.
Yeah.
So and that spread around the country, that you know, and it could be used in different
Yeah.
applications. So
I, I think ultimately that's where I go back to that problem solving
mm,
mindset. Like you could sit there and be scared of it, or you can sit here and say, okay, there are going to be needs that we're going to have going forward as these change happen.
mm-hmm,
And I think as changes happen, that creates opportunities, right? And so I think
yeah,
the mindset that everyone should be having if they want to be successful is, okay, if these changes happen, where are the opportunities going to be? And then let me see how I can address those opportunities as they happen because they will happen. They have to happen, right? Because
Yeah.
every time you have disruptions, that creates a new environment, and it's just you have to understand. Okay, well, if this happens, this is how it's going to affect people's lives, and now these are the new things that people need to exist in that new
Mhm.
environment, right? And so,
Yep.
and some of those things don't exist today, right? So if you could be on the leading edge of what those things will be, and listen, I don't know that, if I knew what they were,
Yeah.
you and I wouldn't be on this conversation right now. I'd be, I'd be,
Yeah.
working on that,
Exactly.
right? So, but I think that's how people need to change their mindset in this new reality.
Yeah. Because it definitely are in a new reality for sure, a new
Oh,
world
a
in a
thousand
sense.
percent. Yeah.
Um. So it's gonna take you know people in different industries, different fields, different expertise to take a look at what they're doing and take a look at what problems they have in their situations and how can they use the AI technology to create solve the problems, create a solution to solve the problems, and how can they actually learn it to maybe instead of the AI replacing them, maybe it may replace them, but if you learn how to actually use it, and maybe you could be the
Exactly.
one that's
Exactly. Yeah.
that's the
You'd rather be the
watching
one
over it.
implementing the
Yeah,
solution than the one being replaced by the solution.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Cause just I don't know if like I heard that like it's a lot of the factory they already use robots, so I know if you're a person that know how to, I guess or in robotics, I guess to say
Yeah.
know how to actually use them and program them, and then that's a job.
Yeah. Yeah, either
Mm,
way, the changes are going to happen, and people have to adjust. And the slower you are to adjusting, I think the more you're going to be left behind. Is unfortunately the reality. But
yeah.
again, I think there's going to be opportunities, but that's where that creative problem solving, I think,
Hmm.
is what is going to be a key skill set to have.
Yeah. 'Cause I know I was just recently watching a podcast on Netflix called AI Killer Robots, but it was mainly about you may have seen it. It's
Yeah, I
about
saw it.
just the different applications they're using it in the military.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as that, I see it's a good thing. It'll save a lot of lives, a lot of soldiers' lives.
Yeah.
You know, but I guess on the flip side of that is, for as like in some of those applications, the fighter jets in situations where the things hit wrong targets and stuff like that. So, but
I just watched
mm,
Stealth with Jamie Foxx and Jessica Biel, which is a movie about that. But
yeah,
the flip side of that too, Sean, is the decision to go to war now is hard because
yeah,
of the human of the human cost of it. Like if there's no human cost, does that make war uh if there's less of a human cost, does that make the decision to go to war easier? That's probably not the conversation for this,
yeah,
but that all these topics that we're talking about, there's two sides of it, right? There's a
mm,
technical side to it, and there's a
and
human side to it, right? And
yeah,
I think that's really the hardest conversations we're going to have as a society is, you know, how do we balance the two, right?
mm-hmm,
And that's I'm guessing you and I probably don't have those answers, but it's definitely we're going to be impacted by that the debate. What side of the debate that ends up on, right? So,
mm,
but yeah,
yeah, exactly. But this conversation will, I guess, invoke people to think, and
yeah, I
then
hope so. Yeah, I mean, if we do nothing else, I hope people start to think about it. I hope people. The biggest takeaway, Sean, is the technology is making it more accessible for the everyday person to do something with it, right?
mm,
And hopefully, hopefully we can encourage people to do something with it, right?
yeah,
I think that's really the biggest takeaway that I hope people come away with.
yeah, me too, me as well. And so I've been trying to learn more about it myself. So definitely,
Yeah.
I can see where it's going. Where it's
Hmm.
already here, but it's moving faster. You gotta get the speed
Yeah,
up or really get left behind.
absolutely.
Yeah. So when you think about entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, looking to leverage no code tools, automation, what's one piece of advice you believe will set them to the path to success, on the path to success?
I think if I only have one, I would say just take action, right? Like,
Mm.
you know, go get your hands dirty, start with a tiny project, go, watch some YouTube videos
Yeah.
and try and do something, right? See if you can do it yourself. If you can't, then maybe you need to bring some people on to help you that do know. But if you can do it yourself, great. But on the flip side, if even if you end up working with someone else, the more that you know about it, the better it will be, even if you work with someone else, right? So
Hmm.
the challenge comes if you work with someone else and you don't know. It's like getting your car worked on and not knowing, anything about cars, or getting your house worked on, not knowing anything about your, house. And they tell
Yeah.
you need XYZ when you really don't, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's easier to get taken advantage of when you're working with someone that has all the power, right, and all the knowledge, right? And so the more
Mhm.
that you can educate yourself, even if you're not the one ultimately building it, the more you can educate yourself, the better. So I would say the best way to educate yourself in this, and again, this is my perspective, right? And this is how I've always learned best, but I've always
Mhm.
learned best by doing.
By doing
And
it.
so I've always kind of like, even if it's a little like, so for instance, like I built one of the apps I built was a bunch of us old guys, rent a gym to play basketball. And so we
Yeah.
always want to know, okay, how many people are coming to it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we want to make sure we got enough to play 5 on 5, but we don't
Yeah.
have 50 people where everyone's waiting, right? So I built a system, via text. We would send out a message, hey, we're playing on such and such date at this time. Are you coming? Right. And so
Yeah.
it would send that out, it would text everyone, and then we'd know, okay, how many people are coming. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, did I have to build that? No. But it was just a project that was like, hey, this would be easier if we did XYZ. It solves a problem
Yeah.
for us, right? And so I'm just like, it's projects like that where it's like, hey, that's a great way to get your hands dirty. I built that in like a couple weeks at most, right? And
Mhm.
it solved a small problem. So it's like projects like that can get your feet wet, get you in the door, get you working on it, make you learn the basics of it. And there's probably a bunch of little tiny projects like that that solve kind of
Mhm.
a tiny problem. So I would just say go and do something. Go and do it. Right? Like don't sit here and listen to the podcast and be like, oh, that's great, and like, oh, I wish I could do XYZ. You can, right? And so,
Mhm.
but you can't do it. What do they say? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, right? Like just go and do
Exactly.
it, and then once you do it, then it's like, okay, well, all right, I did that app. Maybe let me try something more complicated. Or like I said, maybe it's like, okay, this is not for me, but I have an idea. Let me go work with somebody. But at least you know what you're getting yourself into.
Exactly. I mean, do you recommend there any books or YouTube channels or anything where people can like go and maybe if they have an interest in it, learning about it?
So I will say, you know, Bubble was the first tool. Bubble.io is the first tool I learned.
Yeah.
If you go on Bubble, there is a interactive academy, or yeah, I think it's an academy, and then there's an
Mhm.
interactive lessons where they walk you through, like literally it says, okay, now go do this, and it'll kind of walk you step by step, and you have to go into that screen and actually do that thing, and it
Mm.
walks you through like building simple apps, like through those interactive lessons. Like that to me was like a really good starting place for
Okay.
for it. Yeah.
Is that like that's something that cost of like what's the
No.
cost?
That's free. That's free on Bubble.
Free?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's good. That's a cost effective, no cost. So
yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
I
exactly.
know that's one of the biggest thing people always say, oh, it's too much money or so
Yeah, no.
that,
That's 100% free. You can sign up for a Bubble account for free. You can sign up and create kind of a free app. You can't really deploy it,
yeah.
but at least you can at least get your hands wet, hands dirty a little bit, and see if it's something that works for you.
Okay. All right, that's good. That's a good starting point for people.
Yeah, I think that's what I would suggest.
Mm. And I know you said you also mentioned a boot camp you went to. Or
Yeah, I'm actually probably going to launch one as well. But yeah, I went to a boot camp that on the Bubble site they list boot camps there as well.
okay, all right, cool. Well, just let me know when you get your boot camp going. Maybe we can when you get that going, you can come back on. We can talk about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. I might do something online as well. So, but yeah, no, it's something that I've had a couple people reach out to me, so it's something I might do. But yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. Yeah, that's a good starting point for people that may have want to learn about it and build an app or wherever they want to do with it. But at least they it be something new they can learn and it'll be a way to kind of get into the AI and the no code space.
Absolutely. Yep, I totally agree.
Let's see. So talk about success. I know you're very successful. You have had success in multiple industries over a long period of time.
I've had
Uh,
successes and failures. I've had
well,
both.
yeah, of course, man,
Yeah.
that go hand in
Yeah,
hand. You can't
yeah,
have success without failure because that's part of the growth.
yeah.
Um, so how do you personally define success, and how does that definitely evolve over your career?
I think the biggest challenge a lot of times is essentially time management, right? And I think everyone can fall into this trap. I find it really easy to waste a lot of times doing things that don't move the ball down the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, kind of using a football analogy, right? You're trying to get first downs, right? And I think it's really easy to do things that you like doing and you think are fun, but sometimes the things that actually move the needle may not be the things that you enjoy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think one of the hardest things and things that I'm getting trying to even improve on myself still are identifying the things that actually move the needle, right? Because I think that
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard, and then prioritizing because you're the one resource that you cannot get more of is time, right? And so learning how to prioritize and budget your time, and in some cases bringing in, whether it's a virtual assistant or something else,
Yeah.
like delegating in a cost-effective manner, like things that make sense to. I think that's really the key, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
like I said, everyone, the one thing that everyone has equal footing on is everyone's dealing with 24 hours a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
How you split that time up and maximize it is probably the difference between you being successful and not being successful. And
Yeah.
so that's a skill set that I think is probably the biggest difference in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Because like being organized
Yeah,
and 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 I guess honoring and respecting your time. Make sure you're using it wisely to
yeah,
get things done in an efficient manner. So it makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Okay. Um, last question. If this is like really not a tech question, but if you had the opportunity to like go back, may have a conversation with say your younger self, maybe like 20, 21, what would be like some advice, if you had just a few minutes to speak to yourself, what would be something you would say, knowing everything you know now, everything you've been through so far in your path?
You know, I think the one skill set that I've learned to get better at, but I wish I learned it much better. I'll be honest, I'd be in a much better situation today
Mm-hmm.
because I've had some wins, but I've also had some losses that were not small, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the concept of risk management, and this goes back to what I've been saying the whole time, right? Like
Yeah.
not going big from the get-go, that's those are the things I did. Like I took some big risks, at the end of the day, they were gambles, right? And I
Yeah.
think had I understood the process that I know now, I think I would have gotten a lot further and and not expended so much time and money doing some of those things, and I'd be in a much better, place. I'm not in a bad place, but I could be in a much better place. So I think just this concept of managing risk, doing that process, validating. I wish I had known that sooner. And so I know I've talked about it, but if you were to ask me, if your question is what is the number one thing, that is the number one thing. Like I wish I had known that process sooner, right? And that's
Mhm.
why when I mentor startup founders, like that's the number one thing I try and drill into them, just because I know if I
Yeah.
had understood that process earlier, I'd be further ahead, I'd be further along, right? And so I
Mhm.
think that probably is the number one thing. And I think that you know applies to all phases of life, not just kind of startup life, but it's really just
Mhm.
you know, evaluating the risk of all your options and not trying to, there are ways you still have to take risks somewhere. I'm not saying don't take
Yeah.
risks, but I think it's just evaluating the risks and, just being smarter about, not just taking these big risks unnecessarily. Does that make sense? I think that's really,
Yeah.
and that's why that process is so important, right? Like, and having a process to manage that risk. I think there's ways to still take risks, but managing it in a way where, you know, hey, people aren't paying for this. I think it's time for me to go in a
Yeah.
different direction. And so I think that would be 100% what I would tell my younger self. And I think if I understood that sooner, I think I definitely would be uh,
Yeah.
much much further along.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That make it it makes a lot of sense and definitely but the thing is on the flip side of that, if you didn't, take those risks and do the things you've done, you wouldn't be who you are today. So
No,
so
I
it's
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, like everything else, it's a balance, right? And I don't
Yeah.
know where that balance is. Only everyone can kind of decide for themselves. But I think I could have been smarter, So I
Yeah.
agree with you 1,000%. In those risks that I took, I learned a lot. But I
Yeah.
think I could have been a little bit more efficient and smarter with them. So yeah, there's a balance somewhere that I think
Yeah.
that is the happy medium. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand though. You kind of saying just it's good to take the risk, but maybe take maybe a little bit more time and maybe analyzing it before you push the
And
button and do something.
I think it's
Yeah.
testing.
Hmm.
That's really what it comes down to.
Hmm.
And I didn't do that testing part as well as I should. And I think if I tested more smartly, I think that would have made all the difference. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I really appreciate it. It's been a really great episode, and I enjoyed the conversation. I've learned a lot, and I know the listeners will as well. So where can people find you? Where can they reach you? Follow you?
Yeah, so I appreciate. I've enjoyed the conversation as well. I appreciate you having me on the show. So best place is the website, which is www.drivephase.co, which is DRIVEPHASE.co, not .com.
Yeah.
And if you also on most social media channels, it's DrivePhase.co is our handle, but all
Okay.
our social media channels. Social media handles are on our website as well. I put out a lot of YouTube videos that are snippets of a lot of things that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I definitely like to share a lot of stuff. So that would be the best place. And on our website, you can schedule a free consultation with me. I'm always happy to talk to people about kind of what their challenges are. And like I said, I will always give people my honest opinion even if it means, hey, I'm not selling anything. I'm saying this is I think the best way to do it. And like I said, people always appreciate that. I'm always honest with them as far as okay, I think this is
Mm-hmm.
the I think this is what you need to do right now, right? Like you don't need to go build an app. This is what So I'm always happy to meet with people there. So that would be the best way to connect with me.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate it, man, and really been a great episode. Anything else you want to leave the audience of Heighten Sixes family?
No. I think I gave, I think we've been chatting for a while, so I think there's been a bit. I probably gave too much, probably
Yeah.
overwhelmed some people. But no, I think, no, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the time. I really enjoyed the conversation, and like I said, I hope your audience finds it valuable.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know they will. All right, man, I appreciate it, man. And it's been another great episode of Heighten Sixes with Shaun Green and Mr. Zane Hong from Driving Phase. And I really appreciate you, man, and hope we can connect sometime very soon.
More than happy to.
All right, y'all, it's been another great episode, and much love. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.